Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead. This video is all about prepping your containers in the winter, fall, and getting them ready for the spring. Basically refreshing the soil. And we're going to do it without dumping the soil out. I have videos on that. And like every 3 years or so, it's good to dump your soil out onto a tarp, refresh all the container mix, put it back in there. But you don't have to do that every year. You certainly don't have to throw away your container mix, even if your plants have disease or anything like that. Don't worry about that. We're going to refresh the soil in this 20-gallon container. That's about 75 liters, just to give you a sense of the size. Now, the whole key for your container mix is to understand that it's not the same as your earth beds. Your earth beds have a lot more access to deeper nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. We're going to go over the 6 main nutrients, talk about how to get them into your container mix. The earth holds water better, so when you're coming over to your containers, you're thinking a couple of things. You're always having to replace the nutrients at a high level because the plants suck the nutrients out of there. Especially after this growing season, this year is done, there's not much left in there. So you can't just get by replanting. You also want to understand, yes, there are microbes in your container mix, but not like the soil life out in your earth beds. It's very different. So disturbing the soil, mixing the soil, you're not worried about that. You're worried about really 2 things: getting in organic matter and getting in nutrients. The organic matter is really about feeding the plants and holding moisture. And if you had a third thing going on, you'd want to be adding coco coir or peat moss to make sure that the soil holds water, because the plants again are going to suck all the life out of the soil and they're going to suck the moisture out of the soil. So you have to get the container mix prepped to really meet those demands of the plants. Now, a couple of things that you're going to see here. We've got water-soluble fertilizer, organic fish emulsion, or the chemical types. Chemical types have a 24 nitrogen. Just keep that in mind. Using the chemical type fertilizers are not going to damage your plants, they're not going to poison you. That's a myth. If you just use the chemical types over and over and over and over again, it will cause problems in your soil. Mainly, you're just using that and you're not adding in all this great compost and organic matter. So that's 2 totally different things going on there. You can use the chemical types. And why do I stress that? Because people are on a budget. The Stay Green right there was probably $12. That can last for years. There's plenty of fertilizer in there. The fish emulsion, maybe a season, and that was like $30. It's a lot more expensive. And if you're on a budget, I don't want you to fear that, you know what, maybe you're not 100% organic, you had to buy the other fertilizers. Anyway, we'll get to the water solubles. Lime. Lime is going to add calcium. So let's go over real quick the main nutrients for plants. Now there's a lot of micronutrients and trace elements, but the main ones are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Those are the top 3. That's going to come out of this dry organic granular. It's going to be in the compost. The next level, at a much lower level, are magnesium, sulfur, and calcium. Your plants need that. And in the container mix, it's sort of an artificial environment. So you have to make sure you add those in. So garden lime is going to add calcium to your soil, and you're going to know that it's there. Now, Epsom salt gets a really bad rap because people overuse it and they, thought it was a fertilizer that was needed in heavy amounts. It's not. Magnesium sulfate, water soluble, we're going to mix this into a gallon of water, 1 tablespoon. It's just magnesium and sulfur. Low levels of magnesium and sulfur are needed by your plants. You just need to do this once for the season. The mistake made with Epsom salt, magnesium sulfate, is people were just using it over and over again every month at high levels. Just not needed. So I'll show you how to use that. And then we have the organic granular fertilizer. That's basically the same stuff. So I buy whatever's on sale, and this was actually a 27-pound bag I got for $3 on sale, so it's ridiculous. It's a 5-3-3 NP and K, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. We're going to add a lot of this into there. We're going to add compost in there. That's going to give the containers the main nutrients that they need: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Then the Epsom salt and calcium, or garden lime, is going to give them the next tier: magnesium, calcium, and sulfur. You can see that the ingredients are feather meal, poultry manure, bone meal, alfalfa, green sand. A lot of times you see blood meal in there. The ingredients are basically the same. Don't overspend on your organic dry granular fertilizers. The organic dry granulars need time to break down. They need microbes to break them down. There's enough in the soil to do that. By doing this now, in late fall, early winter, this bed or this container is going to be ready to go come spring. All right, let me set everything up and then we'll go through taking care of this 20-gallon container, 75 liter container. Watch how we transform and refresh this container mix. It's beautiful looking stuff, nice and loose. You want to be able to grab it, squeeze it, and then it just gently breaks apart. This is the goal for container mixes. Today is November 7th. November is a great time to refresh your container mix. First thing you want to do, obviously, is take out all the weeds, the debris. And a question I get a lot is, if my plant had a disease, a fungal issue, if it had an insect infestation, do I have to throw away the container mix? And the answer is no. That'd be incredibly expensive. Fungal issues are going to overwinter on host plants around your garden. They're going to float in on spores. Same with insects. So you don't need to throw away your soil, ever, really. If you had something like, I don't know, a viral issue with the plant, which is really rare, hard to identify, you have to get the plant tested, maybe I would get rid of the soil. But most of the time, and a viral issue is inside the plant. Most of the time, you're going to have a fungal issue on the leaves. You take care of that by sprays, and you're going to have insects, which are going to come and go as they please, so you don't need to worry about that. So minus the viral issues of plants, keep your container mix, you're good to go. You want to break it up. You don't need to worry about disturbing the layers of the soil life in here. Containers are very different. Now this mix is dry. I haven't really been taking care of it because nothing was growing in there that I wanted. It's used up a lot of the organic matter in there. It's still good soil, but we have to refresh all of that. You have to assume that most of the ingredients, most of the nutrients have been used up by the plants. I think we just saw, oh, thought that was a grub. Nope, just a stone or a little rock. You have to assume most of the nutrients have been used up by the plant. So the first thing that we want to put in there are the organic granular fertilizers. And again, this is 20 gallons. And I kind of just think of it this way. You're going to, here is something a squirrel put in there. I think that's a black walnut. You're going to find all kinds of stuff in here. You want to make sure that you're visually thinking, you know, remove half the soil. Well, first thing is, if you have the soil all the way up to the top, you're going to have to remove 2 or 3 inches, you know, 7.5 centimeters, maybe a little bit more, because you're going to be putting back in peat moss to hold water, or you're going to be putting in lots of compost. Again, more organic matter, but that has more nutrients. We'll be talking about that. So think about this as, you know, halfway full. You got to get some of the organic granular fertilizer down there, and you also want to get it on the top so that the whole container has fertilizer in there. Now, how I do this, 20 gallons, I go with about this much would be for the bottom layer. Same amount for the top layer. You could put in, you know, you don't have to overly fear this. If you want to put more in, throw in a little bit more. This is about what I do for 20 gallons. So if you have a smaller container, 10 gallons, maybe go with half. These are principles. There's no exact measurement here. I like to make sure that the organic granular is well mixed. The organic granular is going to give your plants the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the main 3 nutrients plants need. So I just spend, you know, a couple of minutes really mixing this through. You want to get way down to the bottom. Mix it through nicely, reach in there all the way to the bottom and pull that bottom soil up. Really mix it through. By doing this now, we're going to add in more nutrients, and it'll continually mix that organic granular through there. So the other thing is sometimes you're going to find wood chips and stuff in there. If your soil has too many wood particles in there, those wood particles are going to try and break down. Well, they are going to break down from microbes, and that's going to take nitrogen from your plant. So you don't want to use a product that is filled with wood as your container mix, or your plants are going to suffer. They're going to be stunted, they're going to look yellow, because the decaying wood is taking nitrogen from your plants. If you look at this, there's not a lot of wood particles in there. Next is, and we have the main nutrients in there, N, P, and K. Next is really water retention. Peat moss holds water. It doesn't add much nutrition to the soil, but it holds water. And this is where it gets tricky, because we're all on different budgets. We all don't have access to compost. So you could do organic granular, 2 things of peat moss like this. That's going to refresh your soil. And then we hit it with a water soluble fertilizer. And you could be done. If you're lucky enough, and that's about, and I'm going to say that's just about this much. You can just visualize it. This is my, oh, that was heavy. This is my compost. This is leaf mold. If you want to subscribe, I'll be doing a video on this in the next couple of days and launching it. If you have lots of compost, you could in theory skip the peat moss and just do, a container like this size in 20 gallons. Let me just fill it up of compost. Compost is great stuff because it has soil life in there, it has microbes, it has all the nutrients, the N, P, and K, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, the magnesium, sulfur, calcium, trace elements, and you can put in, something like that of compost. If you have more compost, add it in there. I again like doing the mix of peat and compost because water is one of the biggest issues. If your container dries out just once and the root systems dry out, it damages your plant. So the peat moss is great at holding water. You want to mix this through. I prefer using my hands, really. Really get down deep, break up that root ball that may be in there. After I mix it through, I assess it. Now again, this is really dry. Once we add water in there, I'm going to show you a test for it. We basically squeeze it, and you want it to break up nicely. This is a pretty good mix. I could add in another thing of peat moss. I feel like I want to do that. I want a little more organic matter in here to hold more water. All right, I have some more peat moss. And the hard thing is we're all going to be starting with different types of container mix. So I really want you to kind of look at it and get a sense of what a good soil looks like. Not a lot of wood chips in there. We'll get to that in a second. Now's a great time to add in your garden lime. This is going to add in calcium. Calcium is a nutrient your plants need, but they don't need it at a high level like they do the N, P, and K. And you want this to really get mixed through. Now, lime, we're adding in really just about that much. Not a whole lot, just sprinkling it in. That's going to give this container enough calcium that you know that it's in there. And if you ever see blossom end rot, sometimes that's due to a calcium deficiency, more due to a watering issue. But by doing this, you know that you have calcium in here, and you just don't need a lot of it. The plant roots will find what it needs. Now, some people worry that lime can influence the pH, make it too alkaline. That's not going to really happen with using a little bit like this. Peat moss is also acidic. It lowers pH. Combining them both, they kind of neutralize each other out. That, that was a little bit less than I wanted, so I'm going to add in just a little bit more. For 20 gallons, something like that. And then I'm just going to mix it into the soil. You don't have to go crazy with this. That's the issue that happened with Epsom salt. People were saying it's a fertilizer. It's true, but it's not a fertilizer that supplies the main nutrients, N, P, and K, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, to the plants, and they were overdoing it. And too much magnesium can be an issue. So we just kind of work that into the soil. I want to work in some more of the peat moss. This really is great for holding water, holding moisture, and mix it through. You could replace this with cocoa coir, and you could stick with a lot of compost. It's starting to look better. There's a lot of room in here. I'm going to add in another thing of compost. And here's the thing that's an issue with compost. When you buy the bagged products, they're not regulated. So a bagged product can say compost. It could be a little bit of compost. It could be a lot of compost. It could be compost that just was put in a bag and is not broken down, or it could be compost that is fully broken down and beautiful, like my leaf mold right here. You want your compost to be a good 90% fully composted, broken down 100%. And I understand, not everybody can make their own compost or have access to it. That's why I like using the peat moss. You can use the peat moss instead of compost. You can just use the compost. You could do a combination of both. You want to mix this through, and you can see that the soil is getting better and better. This is pretty dry. Once we water it in, you're going to see it change structure a little bit. I know that this is going to be holding water. It's going to drain well. It's nice and loose. It's got the nutrients that it needs. So we're on the right track. All right, I think everything is mixed well, nicely through the container mix. We still have some space up here. That will be mulch come spring. I think it looks really good. And let me just give you a close-up of what it looks like dry. We put in the NP and K with the dry organic granular. We added calcium with the lime. Now we're going to water this in with the Epsom salt. And it's just 1 teaspoon, that's it, in a gallon of water. In a 20-gallon container, I'm going to really soak this in with the whole gallon of water. Get that magnesium and sulfur through there. That's all you need. The issue becomes with Epsom salt is thinking you have to use it once a week. Some people are using it. Twice a week is too much. Once a month, you don't need that. You can use Epsom salt at the beginning with your containers, even in your garden if you want, but usually there's enough magnesium and sulfur in there. Just use it once in the beginning. And if I, for instance, have cucumbers growing in here and they're sucking the life out of the soil, I might do this one more time mid-season. Don't overuse the magnesium sulfate or the Epsom salt. Once we put this in, we now have magnesium, sulfur, calcium, the second level, lesser nutrients the plants need. We already have in the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium from the organic granular, and the addition of the organic matter through my compost in here. Again, maybe you can't add in compost, you're putting in peat moss. That doesn't have a lot of nutrients, but it's going to help hold water. When we're done, we're going to add in the water soluble. I'll talk about why that is important. The magnesium sulfate's water soluble, so it's just 1 tablespoon into 1 gallon of water. 1 gallon's about 3.75 liters. And just water in your container. Again, this is a 20-gallon container, about 75 liters. And you're just going to pour in a whole gallon. It's going to take a couple of minutes for this to wash down, especially because everything is dry. When your soil gets dry, it becomes hydrophobic. So I want to really rehydrate it. We've had a drought actually for the last 4 weeks. We haven't had any rain, so that's why everything is so dry. So let this just kind of settle. We'll get to the next step. All right, that took about a minute. And then what I want to do is I just want to mix this through. Peat moss can become hydrophobic, which means it really resists absorbing water right away. And that's an issue sometimes people run into, is they put in peat moss and it's dry, and then they water. The water floats, pours out the bottom of the plant or the container, and it's an issue. Once peat moss absorbs the water, you don't have to worry about it becoming hydrophobic. But because, just by the luck of the draw, we've had a drought, everything is really dry that I typically use. So what you do is you do exactly what you see here, and then you just kind of roll and mix in the moist soil. That's a great start. That's going to rehydrate the peat moss, compost maybe, other bits of stuff in your soil. And you're just working the dry into the moist. Typically you won't have this problem if you're not dealing with a drought. But dry peat moss can do this. And you just kind of work it through. You don't have to go all the way to the bottom. Over the winter it'll take care of that. I mean, if you don't want to do this, you could just leave it. And again, as it rains, snows, and over the months, the water will get absorbed. And you just kind of work it through, and you end up with soil that's starting to look nice. When you squeeze it, holds together, but breaks up nice and loose. Actually, when I squeeze it, if you can hear this, that's the sponginess. And let me put it back here. That's the sponginess. That's how you know that it's loose, it's holding moisture, and your plants are going to really enjoy this. Next, I want to add in some water-soluble fertilizer. It's been about 10 minutes because I was getting the water-soluble set up. Look how nice the soil is now. You know, now that it had time to absorb all the moisture, I mean, this is just really nice stuff, and it's holding together but breaks apart real easily. That's what you're really shooting for. Now, last step, and we'll do this again in the spring with the water soluble, but we are setting up these containers so that they're going to do their thing. They're going to be ready to plant come anytime spring. So this is the chemical type, which you don't need to fear. And right here it says 24 nitrogen, 8 phosphorus, 16 potassium. That's really too high. Cut it in half. So if it says 1 tablespoon in a gallon of water, use half a tablespoon. That's going to make this a 12, 4, 8 NP and K. This is a water-soluble fertilizer, meaning it's readily available. The plants, if they were in there, they could use it right away. The organic granular, the dry stuff we put in, has to be broken down over time by microbes to be turned into a form the plant can use. So you definitely want a water-soluble fertilizer. This is some leftover fish emulsion. I don't really use this anymore, but this is a 511 NP and K. Go ahead and use this at full strength. My dog now eats this, so if I use the fish emulsion, my dog will come in and eat the soil. I recommend AgroThrive. That's a great organic fertilizer. I'm affiliated with them. Check out the video description. Dogs, leave it alone. It's a different process, but it has nice amounts of NP and K, higher than the 1:1 ratio for the P and K, which I want. So AgroThrive works really good. You could put in the AgroThrive water soluble. You're basically taking, again, another gallon. This is half strength of the Stay Green chemical type, and I'm just soaking the top in. Once it's soaked like that, that wasn't quite a gallon, maybe that was 3/4 of a gallon. That's plenty. I want to add in the water soluble now. It's going to get absorbed into the compost, into the peat moss. If there's pieces of wood in there, the wood's going to absorb in the nitrogen, or the nitrogen's going to sit around it. That will help break up having nitrogen in here that's in a form that can be used by microbes and such. That's going to help break up, decompose any materials in there that need to break down further. This way comes spring, so let me rephrase that because that was a little confusing. By putting in the nitrogen, now you're going to allow the nitrogen to be used to break down organic matter that's not fully broken down. The wood particles, any organic matter that hasn't fully composted down, the microbes will start working on that now, and that will help create a situation where those materials, those wood chips, those wood pulp, fiber, whatever you have in there that's not broken down, it won't be challenging your plants for nutrients. So this really sets this container up, I think, perfectly for spring planting. Now it's going to be a little soggy now, like this is too wet. It doesn't matter. You just let this sit now. We don't need to mix it through. This will do its thing. As it rains, the fertilizers will travel further down. Everything in here is going to be set and good to go. This may seem like a lot of work. You know, it goes pretty quickly once you get the hang of it. But you're just adding in the organic granular to give the plants NP and K. They need that. You're adding in the Epsom salt for magnesium, sulfur, and the lime for calcium, the lesser nutrients your plants need. You know everything is in there. Come spring, this will be good to go. You have the peat moss. It's going to hold moisture. Moisture is one of the biggest issues in container growing. When you put in a little plant, everything's fine. When these plants get larger and they have bigger root systems, they're sucking the moisture out and the nutrients out. So you want to make sure your soil is set up the right way. That's the biggest failure. Everything looks good in the beginning, then all of a sudden you run into problems, and it's usually because you're not feeding your plants enough and there's not enough moisture in your container mix. You're not watering enough, it's not holding the water. Please subscribe. I'll teach you how to grow in containers in 2025. Thanks so much for watching. If you check my videos, I've just put most of my raised beds to sleep. I've done some new construction. I'm doing a whole lot getting ready for the spring. Again, thanks for watching. Please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com, and please check out my blog at therustedgardenblog.com.